Okay, thanks. Can you see my slides?
Yes.
Okay, great. All right. Okay, so yeah, just a brief reminder, I'm representing a few co-leads here, Libby Barnes and Pierre Gentine, and then Amy will be taking the second half of this talk. Reminder about the working group when we proposed it back in 2018, having to do with the emerging data science tools that are fascinating and make us wonder whether there's new relationships that could be hiding in big data sets. And at that time, the goal of our group was just to foster more understanding, discussion, adoption, development of these modern data science tools in ways that advance the CLIVAR community. And we propose to do that through conversations between our system science experts and especially statisticians, as well as those of us that are collaborating with computer scientists. So some of the questions, the context back then, and 3 years ago, we were in the infancy of adopting these tools. And general curiosity about what tools are reproducibly helpful, gaining consensus, technically approachable, and actually statistically novel, and therefore how should the community organize itself? So we left ourselves a little ambiguous intentionally in the beginning as we formed our group. My personal interest has to do with replacing physical processes with data-driven machine emulators, and at the time there were big questions outstanding about how to achieve things like physical constraints and generalizable emulators. And the issue of uncertainty quantification was a major motivation across the group. So these are some examples of opportunities and challenges that I introduced at the kickoff of the group back in 2019. Okay, but again, the theme was conversations being needed across these disciplines in this time. So the original plan specifics were to do the following. Begin with bi-monthly webinars to foster these conversations, to use those as a nexus to have working group discussions with the community, transdisciplinary discussions across the statistics and machine learning and earth science divides, to distill from those some sort of curated experiences, to encourage benchmark curated data sets as part of this process, to have that revolve around some sort of online presence, but ultimately just to have these working group discussions with each other that might feed into publications. There are things worth reporting out. So progress, that's the theme of this update, right? So I'd like to report on progress on these webinars and working group discussions, which I think have been very successful. And then also unexpected surprises, which there's been a lot of. So progress first. We had a year of webinars during an interesting year. There were 20 speakers. You can look at the YouTube playlist to see them all. These are an example of the first 5. Things kicked off with Bin Yu, who gave us a really, really interesting veridical data science talk that kind of kicked things off from the holistic statistician perspective and stimulated some interesting discussions that happened across the working group for the many months to come. I can't go through all the speakers and topics. Hopefully you were able to attend some of these. I do have some interesting facts, courtesy of Jenny. These were collected 6 months ago, so they're a bit outdated, but they're fairly well attended. 45 participants per talk on average. The YouTube playlist is getting some action. We have some notes from the working group, courtesy of Tom Buchler, one of our group members, on Google Drive that you can look at if you're interested. 3,000 total views on YouTube as of June 1st or so. The hottest, the speaker that was most attended live is Michael Brenner. This was a really interesting talk on, next generation solution-aware discretizations of partial differential equations that can produce surprisingly convergent results with amazing coarse graining. So I understand Michael Brenner is now working in Google rather than Harvard and has a team there. And then the speaker with the most YouTube views was Vipin Kumar. I wish I could just spend an hour talking about these webinars. One of my personal favorites was also by Claire Monteleone, who showed us that normalizing flows is an algorithm to be aware of if you are interested in downscaling, where the idea of a latent space that knows about geography that's common to both coarse and fine-grained simulations can be helpful. But let's see. Okay, I want to move on to the unexpected surprises. So first one, of course, was COVID. 3/4 of our leadership have young kids and growing research labs, and the loss of childcare really disrupted our service activities as we were all treading water trying to keep our research responsibilities and teaching responsibilities afloat. We're not alone in that, of course. But we were fortunate to have a really lucky surprise. which is that the community really blossomed on all of these goals that motivated our working group in unexpected ways, in unbelievably well-funded ways, actually. So you can trace this to beginning just a month after we announced the working group in November of 2019. The Pangeo project received over $2 million from the Moore Foundation. And this is a grassroots effort that is revolutionizing cloud-based data analysis and really leading to large-scale curation of benchmark data sets, which had been one of our motivating goals. Here's an example of a benchmark data set that's really taking off, WeatherBench and James. I just saw a talk from researchers within NVIDIA who are using really advanced neural Fourier operators to beat benchmarks on this data-driven weather forecasting competition. So this is just taking off at amazing scale. It's being owned by journals now too. So here's a collaboration between Copernicus journals, Earth System Science Data, and GMD have an entire issue devoted to curating these benchmark data sets at a scale beyond anything our working group could have imagined. Then we have the NSF AI centers disrupting things. So $20 million of NSF funding almost a year later, coming to Oklahoma for the AI for ES Institute, which is really tackling issues of uncertainty quantification and trustworthiness of emerging methods. And Libby Barnes, one of our co-leads, has been entrained into that effort. Then we had January, half a year later, another $10 million from the Schmidt Futures Foundation for M2 lines, being led by one of our working group members, Laura Zana, which is really exploding progress on this issue of my own personal interest, machine learning-based process parameterization. Look at that huge team of people that are now working on this. And then the latest entry, September 2021, the LEAP, Learning the Earth with Artificial Intelligence and Physics, Science and Technology Center, which is directed by Pierre Gentin, one of our co-leads, and I'm on the executive committee as well, and has similar goals. So given all these unexpected surprises, where does this leave us? We've been doing a lot of rethinking. The upshot is that 3 of us co-leads are stepping back to help with these larger scale efforts. I think I can speak for Libby and Pierre in saying that my own view is that the goals of this working group no longer seem necessary or align with our service priorities anymore, given these unexpected surprises. When we volunteered 2 years ago, the landscape was completely different and a lot has changed. The community's totally blossomed. Meanwhile, I think US CLIVAR's interest in these themes should be well served by the proliferating opportunities we've curated here. So on the training front, there's summer schools and short courses at amazing scale out of the AI2S NSF Center at Oklahoma. And LEAP is just spinning up its education modules, but there's open source, open science, GitHub modules for training as part of its mission, the mission of any STC to do outreach. There are RU programs at both of these large NSF centers, and there are summer schools that are blossoming and deepening every year, serving PhD level graduate students at NCAR. There's new journals for the working group's goal of fostering discussion across these disciplines. There's a whole new journal in AMS on artificial intelligence for Earth systems and in Cambridge Environmental Data Science. And there's workshops. So, speaking of discussions, workshops happening and discussions happening on grander scales at the DOE and at the national academies and at the NOAA AI workshops and at other NSF-funded workshops, among others. So that's where it leaves 3 of us. Where does it lead us? That's the theme of the next half of this presentation. And I'll pass the mic to Amy Braverman, who's got a vision for the next step of the working group. So thanks for your time, and I'll be happy to discuss with you.
All right, thank you, Mike. Your presentation puts me somewhat to shame here. I have a good old Beamer LaTeX presentation, and I only have a few slides here. So I first want to say how much I enjoyed working with Mike in the last 2 years. That's a connection that I will plan to carry forward, if not through this mechanism, then through just sheer will and the fact that he's right down the freeway at Irvine. I would like to say that I respectfully disagree with Mike about one thing. And that is that the goals of the data science working group have been met by all these other really impressive activities. When I signed on to be part of this, I was more of a mind that data science was something broader than what ended up actually in the proposal. And of course, I signed on to the proposal, so I take responsibility for that. But my feeling from the beginning was that data science is still an emerging discipline, and there are, many of the tools and techniques that Mike spoke about are certainly things that you would call data science, but they are not the whole of data science. They are, in fact, very specialized and focused on a specific set of problems that is narrower than data science as a whole. So, as the one left standing here, this is my view of what we should do with the remaining time that we have. And that starts with taking a broader view of data science. It's more than machine learning. It's more than machine learning for learning physics about parameterizations, although I certainly understand the value of that activity. I feel that the people who are in this group have been identified by CLIVAR as recognized experts in data science as it pertains to climate, and that there's an intellectual contribution to be made by synthesizing and interpreting current thinking about what data science is and how it applies and how it can support climate science as a whole. So my proposal is that we focus our efforts on creating a product, which would take the form of a journal paper, hopefully, that reflects the collective thought process and opinions of the people in the working group, and maybe somewhat ambitiously attempt to articulate a framework within which to consider how data science can contribute to climate science. Many of the people in the working group already work, if they're data scientists, they work in areas that are aligned with climate scientists and they collaborate with climate science. People in the group who are climate scientists primarily are obviously well-versed in many data science tools, and so I think we have a large pool of case studies to draw on there. But I think we could do something more here, and that is make recommendations for accelerating climate science productivity by highlighting not just specific techniques of data science, but how do I put it, the thought process that goes into it. So I've hit there the main thing, which is we think we would like to try to write a journal paper and hold an in-person workshop, conditions permitting, in the latter part of 2023 to get kind of broader community input. And let's say that what we're going to write prior to that workshop, we'll call it a white paper. The workshop would be organized around the white paper and getting diverging opinions. And then we would spend time converting that white paper hopefully into a publication. So here are the members of the working group previously identified both as core and not core, who have expressed an interest in continuing down this path. You can see that it actually is a pretty reasonable split between people who identify themselves as primarily on the data science end of things, but with strong interest in climate, and people who are primarily on the climate end, but have a strong interest in data science. Bo Lee has graciously agreed to help lead the group with me, to step in as a lead. Bo is a statistician at Illinois, and also has a great deal of involvement in the new NSF-funded institute called the Institute for Mathematical and Statistical Innovation, which is a collaborative effort with the University of Chicago and UIUC and Northwestern, and I can't remember who else. And they're embarking now on a year devoted to climate. And so I thought having Bo on here would be a nice synergy. We might be able to boost the productivity a little bit by organizing a little bit around some of those activities. I do think we need someone who's more on the climate end of things to be on the leadership cabal, but we haven't identified who that person is. Tom did an absolutely phenomenal job organizing the seminar series, and we've been kind of poking and prodding him, but I don't think he's actually caved in and said yes yet. And there are, of course, other alternatives. So let me just show real quick here a quick set of tentative milestones / schedule that I just came up with to hopefully convince you that there's a there and that we do have a plan, and that would involve a couple of near-term organizational meetings to try to get on the same page about what it is we're trying to do. We have had one meeting where we started to discuss it, but I don't feel like we came to the end of that discussion yet. Then we would use that to try to parse out topic areas that we might that could be given to different subcommittees. And my thought is that we will organize this around sort of a paper outline, you might say, because that would be the logical way to decide on discrete blocks of things that should be talked about. Then we have a period of writing in which the co-leads would try to put together an introduction. Whether that introduction remains the introduction by the time the paper gets published or the white paper gets written is a question, but it would at least be something out there at the very top level to try to organize and motivate the thinking. That would be followed by September 1st-ish meeting to review progress and an opportunity to go back and revise things. Synthesis by co-leads and an initial draft by the end of the year. Draft to be circulated early next year to the working group with comments. We would plan to meet by WebEx often during this period. I don't mean to suggest that these will be the only meetings, but these would be the ones we would put down as milestones. We would aim to have this white paper ready to circulate by May 1st, have the workshop in the summer 2023, and turn it into a journal paper with a target submission date of December 31st. So that's kind of what I had in mind. One of the things that we learned from the past 2 years is that this is service, and we can't ask people to do a lot of technical work. NSF thought this was worth paying for, and I think a lot of people would say that the idea of curating benchmark data sets and the like, that's a high investment activity, and it's not really something that you can do sort of on a part-time basis. So part of the goal here is to keep the burden low so that people will actually participate. And that's all I've got. I'll stop there.
Great. Thank you, Amy, and thank you, Mike, for the summary. Do we have any questions for them? I also see Boley on the line, so
Yeah.
have all three of the current co-chairs on. Gokhan, I see your hand raised.
Yeah, I mean, this is almost following up from our CSM advisory board meeting last week where Mike was. And I understand where Mike, Libby, and Pierre are coming from, and they're all fortunately associated with CESM, but I also understand where Amy is coming from.
Mm-hmm.
And one thing that I was actually maybe wrongly under the impression that the funded projects, and my understanding is that there will be a ton of funded projects coming from the DOE side as well, following the extensive workshops pretty soon. But my understanding is that most of those projects, and I think Amy indicated that they're primarily focusing on AI and ML part, replacing the certain parameterizations or certain techniques within an Earth system model. However, as far as I can tell, two aspects are still sort of missing / needed. And we have components of that. I'm talking maybe too much referencing to CSM, but when I think about Earth system data, I also include how to deal with large data sets both in terms of storage as well as how to analyze those large data sets. Because right now, as a modeling center, these are major bottlenecks for us. The difficulty in analyzing the tools and all that stuff. Perhaps maybe Pangeo project is actually helping in that regard. So that's, I think, something. But as far as I can tell, the lead M2 lines, they don't necessarily have a large sort of data component in that sense. Although I'm not, Michael knows more than I do on that.
Yeah.
So that's one thing. And then the second thing that's, and that comes back to the climate sort of expert aspect of these things, is that some of these funded projects, at least in my personal view, seem to be a bit heavy on the machine learning and artificial intelligence side. Although the end goal of many of these projects is essentially somehow bring all of these things into Earth system models and combine with the GPU applications to essentially take advantage of those. But the teams themselves, maybe it's too generalization. I feel like personally, there is not much climate expertise embedded in the teams. There are collaborations with the centers, but it is not just bringing the components together. It is not just putting machine learning into something and then here it goes. That's not the thing. It never happens that way. Look at the DOE example, right? So it requires significant expertise. Bringing these things to bringing these things to practical use. So I'm just maybe mumbling, but I still see the sort of need for this working group or panel, whatever it is, and I still see quite a bit of missing aspects or need to be addressed, essentially aspects in that.
Yeah. Can I give a real quick response to that? I agree with you. There's been the academic data science community, believe it or not, there is one, has been wrestling with what data science is and what it can bring. And I think that's the intellectual work that needs to be done here, is what is the overarching intellectual framework that ties these things together? And I feel that would address some of your concerns.
I see hands raised by Shane and Antonietta. Shane, do you want to go ahead first?
Yeah, sure. Mike, Amy, thank you very much for your presentation today. So this is not a question, this is more of a comment. I'm currently the outgoing co-chair of the POS panel, and I'm also one of the co-chairs of the Ocean Uncertainty Quantification Working Group of US CLIVAR. So I don't know if it's your feeling, Amy, but I do feel for you to have your colleagues leaving the group. They certainly have good reasons, I'm sure, to do so. But I think what you presented and what you're suggesting for the coming year is great, because I think you are. So I do not know if you are involved in any of those big funded initiatives that were described by Mike, but I think not being part of it is actually an opportunity for you to take a step back and have an objective, consensus within the group, opinion piece about it, and exactly to tell us, oceanographer and climate scientists that are not using yet these tools, what it is, what it can do for us, and what it cannot do at this stage for us. So I think your plan is very good. I wish you good luck, and I hope you will be also, communicating with the Ocean Uncertainty Working Group that you are part of, to try to help us understand as well how, your initiative and, machine learning data science method can help us with ocean uncertainty. So good luck and thank you.
Thank you. It's a great synergy, and I feel like, no disrespect to the previous leadership, but this gives a new opportunity to have a tighter connection with the Ocean UQ group.
Antonietta.
Hi, absolutely. Yeah, thank you so much for your presentations. very good to see where things are going. And so I actually would like to start from where Gokam left. I agree very much with Gokam in what he said, if I understood his points. I think that although, as Mike pointed out, there has been all this progress, and now, data science, machine learning, I think it's advertised in many proposal calls, and so it seems like a very hot topic to pursue. I do think that there is still a dichotomy between the language of data science and the research that the climate research that many of us do. And I think that can also then limit maybe the applicability of these tools to really improve models or understand models better. I think data science can be a tremendous tool for reduce the number of variables to kind of boil down the essence of what's going on, maybe in a large climate model. But I think in my mind, there is the need for more collaborative activity between climate scientists and data scientists. So in spite of the success that some of the techniques have shown, I think there is still we're still limited in understanding why certain things work. So maybe, certain algorithms can give you a better answer prediction, but we are still not clear why that's the case and what really matters to get there. So I think this type of dialogues needs to be increased and deepened to really make fully use of these powerful techniques for understanding climate better.
Mike, you have your hand raised.
Oh yeah, thanks. I wanted to respond to a few of these things. So I'll start with Gökhan. The big data issue you mentioned, I totally feel like Pangeo is a great place to look to for that. I think so. LEAP has completely partnered with Pangeo to do all of their data dissemination through cloud-based services. And I've been amazed with my own graduate students, the way they access CMIP data through Pangeo. Feels like the future. I do have big questions about how Exceed and Access and also NCAR will or won't be a public model of that cloud-based infrastructure. And I'm a little concerned that LEAP has $500,000 in Google Cloud credits as their portal to the cloud, but that's a separate conversation. And Shane, I totally agree with you. I love Amy's vision. She was this close to joining on, but I'm just so time limited that I've come to accept I have a narrower interest pool on the emerging word in our emerging data science title rather than the data science holistic term. And I really respect Amy's broad vision, and I'm excited to read what comes out of it. And then Antonietta, about the language barrier, I think this is something I'm seeing all of these large-scale centers struggle with as well, but it's very interesting to watch the dialogue. There's a huge language problem between data scientists and climate practitioners that these centers are confronting, but they have the scale of these educational modules that I think are great to look at for inspiration. I know, AI for ES is being led by a computer scientist, but dealing with real meteorologists, and LEAP is almost half data scientists in computer science departments as well. And the first kickoff meeting was all about like, how do you even talk to each other about these problems? But I would encourage looking at the websites of both of those big centers for what I hope will be more and more distillations of the distracting language that prohibits collaboration across the divide.
But I do think that collaborations would actually help with that, because if data scientists and climate scientists are trying to solve a problem together, I think that some of these barriers will automatically be eliminated.
Okay, and I think we'll end with a question from Jason. Go ahead.
Great talk. Thanks for putting it on. One thing I actually thought about was actually something like the applications of these things. For example, when we're looking at like S2S applications, one of the things that we run into is actually maybe another user at sort of the end user, so the forecaster, or even a partner or a decision maker. And what we've run into when we're starting to introduce some of these AI and big data kinds of things are that while they don't necessarily want to see all the sausage making that goes on. They have to have confidence that what we're doing is not just giving, excuse me, a very good forecast or a very good answer, but they have to understand why it's doing that. And so I think that that's another maybe opportunity. And so I know you had the three sort of the Venn diagram going on with sort of like climate scientists and statisticians and Earth system or big data, climate, Earth system modelers and the statisticians. I'm wondering maybe if there's a way, even if it's a small piece, that we bring in some of the maybe end users who end up using, for example, the scenarios we run in our climate models or the S2S forecast we're running out of them, to make sure that we're fitting their needs as well, and sort of thinking about that too. So just kind of a thought or a comment on that.
Well, I'd like to just end with a quick comment about this idea of communication, and how do you bridge the divide, et cetera. And I think that it goes beyond the words and the terms. I think earth scientists and people who like to put themselves in the data science category think about things in different ways, and I think that's the gap that has to be bridged.
All right. I'd like to wrap up today's webinar here. I think the excitement that our panel members have shown for the data science working group, I think there's going to be a lot to work on for you and Bo, Amy. So I look forward to working with both of you and accomplishing everything that you have set out and outlined in your timeline. So thank you everyone for joining today. We do have one final working group webinar, which is tomorrow, same time, featuring the Air Sea Interactions working group. So I hope to see you guys there, and have a great day, everyone.